table was set for 6, and I was the only one sitting at it. I had made the pot roast the night before, the way my mother taught me, with the carrots cut thick and the onions browned first in butter. I had ironed the linen tablecloth, the cream one with the small embroidered roses along the edges, and I had found the good candlesticks in the back of the cabinet and polished them until they shone. I had done all of this because I thought my family would be there. I thought my children, the two people I had given everything to for 40 years, would walk through that door. They didn't. At 6:15, I called my son. He picked up on the third ring, which surprised me. I had half-expected voicemail. Mom. His voice was the one he used when he was distracted, the one where his words came out a little too smooth, a little too practiced. Hey, I'm so sorry. We got held up at the Mathers thing. You know how these dinners go. I didn't say anything for a moment. The Mathers thing, I repeated. Their annual dinner party. I told you about it weeks ago, remember? It runs long every year. These are important people for the practice, Mom. I can't just leave. He was a physician. A good one, I believed. He had always used that as a reason, and for most of his life, I had accepted it, because medicine is a demanding thing and I was proud of him. But this was my 72nd birthday, and the Mather dinner party was, as I would later find out, 12 miles away. My daughter-in-law had not called. My daughter had not called either, though she had texted at 5:47. So sorry, Mom. Things got crazy today. Give you a big hug soon, with a small red heart at the end. She lived 40 minutes from me. Her husband was a real estate developer, and they went to a lot of parties. I knew this because she posted photographs of those parties on her phone. Photographs I saw when I looked at her page on Sunday mornings with my coffee. Photographs of her in a silver dress laughing with other people in silver dresses. She had not posted a photograph of my birthday. I hung up with my son after a few minutes. I don't remember what else was said. I remember that I told him I understood, which was something I'd been saying to my children for years without really examining whether it was true. Then I sat down at the table I had set for 6 myself. My son and his wife, my daughter and her husband, and my granddaughter, who was 15 and who I had hoped would be there. And I ate the pot roast by myself. I am not going to tell you, I cried. I want to, because it would make the story tidier. But I didn't cry. I was too quiet inside for crying. I ate the meal I had cooked, drank 1 glass of the wine I had bought, blew out the candles, and then I sat in the dark for a while looking at the roses on the tablecloth. I had been sitting in the dark for a while now, not just that night. Let me back up. Let me tell you who I am before I tell you what happened next, because I think it matters. My name is Ruth. I am 72 years old. I live in a house in a small town in central Virginia. A house with a good front porch and a tulip tree in the backyard that turns golden every October. I was a school nurse for 31 years at an elementary school 2 towns over. I have 2 children. My son, I will call him by what I have always called him, which is simply my son, is 44. My daughter is 41. My husband, their father, passed away 6 years ago from pancreatic cancer. It was fast. 4 months from diagnosis to funeral. And then the house became very large and very quiet, and my children came home for the service and then went back to their lives, which was what they were supposed to do, and I told myself that too. I had spent my whole career looking after other people's children. Before that, I looked after my own. I made their lunches and took them to soccer practice and held them through fevers and sat in the back of auditoriums applauding their recitals. When my son was 22 and in his 3rd year of medical school and ran out of money in February, I sent him $4,000 I had been saving for a trip to Ireland I never took. When my daughter's first marriage fell apart, I drove 14 hours to her apartment in Atlanta and spent 2 weeks sleeping on her couch and helping her pack boxes. I never asked either of them to remember these things. You don't do things for your children with a ledger in mind. But I suppose I had believed, quietly, without ever saying it out loud, that it would mean something. That showing up for them again and again and again would mean they might show up for me. My birthday is November 18th. It falls in that gray stretch before Thanksgiving, when the days are short and the light is thin. I had asked them in September, both of them, separately. I kept it casual because I did not want to seem needy. I said I was thinking of making pot roast. Would they be able to come? My son said he thought so. He'd check with his wife. My daughter said absolutely, wouldn't miss it. I took both of those answers at face value because I wanted to. The night of my birthday, I sat at that table until the candles burned down to the holders, and then I cleaned up the kitchen, put the leftover food in containers, and went to bed. I did not sleep well. At some point around 2 in the morning, I was lying in the dark listening to the tulip tree move in the wind, and I thought to myself, I am waiting for something that is not coming. And I don't mean the dinner. I mean something I've been waiting for a long time. My granddaughter called the next morning. She is my daughter's daughter from her first marriage, 15 years old, and she has her great-grandmother's red hair and a laugh that fills a room. She is the one person in my family who calls without a reason, who calls just to call, who says, "Grandma, I was just thinking about you," in a way that makes me believe it. She called at 8:47 on the morning after my birthday, and the first thing she said was, "Grandma, I am so sorry I wasn't there. I asked Mom, and she said we weren't going, and I didn't find out until yesterday, and I felt so bad all night." She had not been told until the day before. My daughter had not told her own daughter we were coming until close enough to cancel. I sat down on the kitchen stool and looked out at the tulip tree. The leaves were mostly down by then, scattered yellow across the yard. "It's okay, sweetheart," I said, because that is what I always say. But then something stopped me. Maybe it was the 2 in the morning thought from the night before. Maybe it was just that I was tired of saying things I didn't fully mean. "Actually," I said, "it wasn't okay. It was a hard night. But it wasn't your fault." There was a pause on the line. "I know it wasn't okay, Grandma," she said very quietly. "That's why I'm calling." We talked for an hour. About nothing, really. About her art class, which she loves, and about a book she was reading, and about whether Virginia or North Carolina has better mountains. She made me laugh, twice. When we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table and drank my coffee and thought about what it means to be seen by another person. How rarely it happens, even in your own family. How much it matters when it does. I didn't call my children that week. I usually called on Sundays, a habit from years back when long-distance rates were a real consideration, and Sunday afternoons were the time. But I let that Sunday pass. My son called the following Tuesday. My daughter texted on Thursday. Neither of them mentioned my birthday. I want to be careful here because I am not interested in painting my children as villains. They are not villains. They are people who got busy and self-absorbed and maybe a little careless, the way people do when they have never had to face the consequences of their carelessness. I had protected them from those consequences their whole lives. I had said, "I understand, and it's okay, and don't worry about me." And each time I said those things, I had made it a little easier for them to believe them. But I was 72 years old, and I had just eaten my birthday dinner alone, and something had shifted in me. I made an appointment with my attorney. His office was in town, above the old hardware store, and I had worked with him on my husband's estate and on my own will afterward. He was a practical, quiet man who had known our family for 20 years. When I sat down across from him and told him I wanted to revisit my estate plan, he didn't ask many questions. He just pulled up the documents and listened. I told him what I wanted to change. My house is the thing of value. I bought it with my husband in 1987 for what seems like nothing now. It is a 4-bedroom colonial on a third of an acre. And in the current market, it would sell for more money than I ever made in 30 years of nursing. My will, as it stood, divided everything equally between my son and my daughter. That was what my husband and I had agreed on. Equal shares, keep the peace. I told my attorney I wanted to change that. I told him I wanted to sell the house. He looked up. Sell it, I said, and use the proceeds to set up a trust. The primary beneficiary is my granddaughter, for her education, and after that, for whatever start in life she needs. College, graduate school, a down payment, medical bills, whatever she actually needs. He wrote notes on his legal pad. And the remainder? He asked. Donate to the school where I worked, I said. Set up a small endowment for the nurse's office. Supplies, medications, things they never have enough budget for. I saw 30 years of kids coming in who didn't have what they needed. I'd like to change a little of that. He nodded. He had the good attorney habit of keeping his face neutral, but I thought I saw something in his eyes. And for your son and daughter? I had thought about this part. I had thought about it carefully. I am not a cruel person. I do not want to be a cruel person. But I had also sat alone at a table set for 6 with candles burning down into nothing. And I thought about all the times I had swallowed what I actually felt because I did not want to be difficult. I thought about the trip to Ireland I never took. I thought about the 2 weeks on a couch in Atlanta. I thought about the $4,000 and all the Sundays and the birthday pot roast that I ate alone. $1 each, I said, symbolic, so they understand it was intentional. My attorney put down his pen. Ruth, he said, and then he stopped. You think I'm being harsh, I said. I think you're in pain, he said, and I want to make sure this is what you want when you're not in pain. I appreciated that. I told him to draw up the documents and I would come back in 3 weeks. If I felt differently in 3 weeks, I would tell him. I did not feel differently in 3 weeks. There is something I did not expect, which was how much better I felt once I had made the decision. Not better in a triumphant way. Not vindicated, exactly. Just lighter, like I had been carrying something for a long time and had finally set it down. I started sleeping through the night again. I took a weekend trip to the Shenandoah Valley that I'd been putting off for 2 years by myself, and I hiked a trail I'd read about and ate dinner at a little place in a town I didn't know and read my book in a bed and breakfast with a fireplace and felt genuinely content. I started thinking about where I wanted to live after I sold the house. I had always assumed I would stay, the way you assume the geography of your life is fixed. But the house was big, and most of the rooms were empty, and the yard was more than I needed. I looked at some smaller places, a condo in Charlottesville with a farmer's market 2 blocks away, a little house in Staunton near a coffee shop I had loved for years. I started to think of these things as possibilities rather than losses. My granddaughter visited the week before Thanksgiving. She drove up with a friend, just for the day, and we made soup and walked around the town, and she helped me go through some boxes in the spare room. She didn't know yet about any of the decisions I had made. I wasn't ready to tell her. I just wanted to spend a Tuesday afternoon with her, which I did. When she hugged me goodbye in the driveway, she held on a few seconds longer than usual and said, "I love you, Grandma," very plainly. Just that. And I stood there and held her and thought, This is what I was looking for. Not at the table with the candles. Here. Thanksgiving came. My son and his wife hosted it this year, and I went because I had decided I would not become someone who withdrew from life entirely just because I was hurt. I would go. I would be present. I would simply be honest with myself about what I was seeing. What I saw was that my son was a good host, and his house was beautiful, and his wife worked very hard to make everything look effortless. I saw that my daughter arrived late and left early and spent most of the middle portion of the evening on her phone. I saw that my granddaughter sat next to me at the table and put her hand on my arm when she laughed, the way she has always done since she was small. No one mentioned my birthday. I didn't bring it up. I had thought I might, in some quiet moment, find a way to say, "That night mattered to me, and I need you to know that." But the quiet moment didn't come, And I realized that maybe it didn't need to. Maybe the changes I had made were the thing I needed to say. Maybe that was the conversation. On the drive home, it was cold and clear, and I could see stars through the windshield, the kind of sky you get in November in Virginia when the air is dry. I drove for a while without the radio on, just listening to the engine in the road, and I thought about my husband. I thought about what he would say about all of it. He was a practical man, not sentimental, and he loved his children fiercely. But he also had a directness I had sometimes envied. He would have said something simple. He would have said, "You did what you needed to do." I think he would have been right. I signed the revised documents in December. My attorney had everything in order. I signed my name where I was told to sign, initialed the pages, and sat for a moment in the quiet of his office with the afternoon light coming through the window. Outside, someone was stringing lights on the oak tree in front of the courthouse. I watched them for a minute. "Is there anything else?" my attorney asked. "No," I said. "That's everything." I put the copies in my bag and thanked him, and walked down the stairs and out to the street. It was cold, but not biting. The kind of December cold that feels clean. I walked to the coffee shop on the corner and ordered a large coffee and sat at the window table and watched the lights go up on the oak tree. My children would find out eventually. When I sold the house, which I planned to do in the spring, they would have questions. When those questions led to conversations that led to the truth, there would be reactions I couldn't predict. My son would be measured at first. My daughter would cry. There might be anger. There might be long silences. I had played out the versions in my head enough times to know I would never guess it exactly right. I had decided I could live with that uncertainty. What I could not live with was another decade of making myself smaller so that they would not have to reckon with what they had done. I had spent a long time believing that love meant absorbing, endlessly, whatever the people you loved could not be bothered to give you. I had spent a long time mistaking patience for love and accommodation for grace. I was 72 years old, and I was done. My granddaughter doesn't know yet about the trust. I will tell her when the time is right, when the house has sold and things are more settled. I don't want it to change how she is with me. She calls me on Tuesday afternoons, usually. And sometimes we talk for 20 minutes, and sometimes we talk for 2 hours. And she tells me about her art and her friends and the things she is worrying about at 15. And I listen. Really listen. And I tell her what I think. And she does the same for me. That is the most valuable thing I have, and no document can create it. I found the condo in Charlottesville in February. 2 bedrooms, good light, the farmer's market exactly 2 blocks away as promised. I put down a deposit and listed my house in March, and on the first Sunday it was on the market. 4 families came through. By Tuesday, I had an offer. By Wednesday, I had accepted it. I called my granddaughter that night to tell her about the new place. She asked if there was room for her to visit, and I said yes, always. And she asked if we could go to the farmer's market together when I moved in, and I said yes to that too. I did not call my son or my daughter that night. I waited until the following week, once everything was certain. By then, it was spring, and the tulip tree in the backyard had opened up in pale yellow, the way it does every April, and I walked around the yard one last time on a Sunday morning and looked at the tree and thought about the 37 years I had lived under it. All the things that had happened in that yard, the birthdays and the arguments and the ordinary Tuesdays that had made up most of a life. I thanked the tree, which is a thing I believe you are allowed to do at 72. Then I went inside and started packing. I am not angry anymore. That surprised me. I thought the anger would stay, or that it would curdle into something worse, a bitterness that would color everything. But it didn't. What stayed was something quieter, something that felt more like clarity than anything else. I know who shows up for me now. I know who I want to show up for. I know that love is not a feeling you hold in your chest and wait for someone to return. It is a thing you do, a thing you choose, a thing that has to move in both directions, or it is not really love at all. My son has a good life. My daughter has a good life. I hope they are happy in those lives. I hope that someday, when their own children are grown, they understand something about what they gave away on the night of November 18th. I hope they have people in their lives who show up for them, who iron the tablecloth and polish the candlesticks and set the table and wait. But I will not be the one waiting anymore. I am going to Charlottesville. I am going to the farmer's market. I am the game, broke them, and made you beg granddaughter, who has her great-grandmother's red hair and a laugh that fills a room, and who, every single time, picks up the phone.